Good morning, all you wonderful people. Making another morning video here, and I thought I'd speak a little bit on Bitcoin just because it's a pretty critical time for Bitcoin, and I would like to try and simplify it for people. A lot of people, there's just a ton of confusion around Bitcoin, and understandably so. It is a bit of a stretch for some people to understand its importance and why it has value and whatnot. I had a friend message me today asking about ETFs, exchange traded funds. So what that is a derivative of an underlying asset, so say gold. And what they'll do is they'll sell you an ounce of gold, but they don't actually have the gold. It's just a paper representation of that. And the problem with that is that they'll sell that same ounce of gold over and over and over. And all these people that hold money in these exchange traded funds, if they demanded physical delivery of the gold they own on paper, there is 10 times more gold owned in these exchanges than we actually have physical gold. So that would put pressure on the metals to 10x overnight. Like the price would go tenfold because they don't have the gold. And he said, what are my thoughts on that? And what is the importance of owning physical? So the importance of owning physical is if we all own physical metals over the electronic version of gold and silver and whatnot, then you actually have it in your possession and the price would reflect the true price of gold. So they're able to manipulate the price of these assets by having paper contracts and not actually having the gold that they're selling everyone. So if everyone demanded physical delivery, the price would be much, much higher, and that would be good for all of us who choose to hold gold and silver. And his comment was that he chooses to own some physical gold and silver because it's, if you don't have it in your physical possession, you don't own it. And that's very true. And that's why I choose to own physical gold and silver. And he made the comment that that's why he chooses not to hold Bitcoin, because you don't physically own it. You don't have it in your possession. You don't touch it. I want to just elaborate on that a little bit. So that is somewhat true. It's not a physical object that you can hold. However, you do own it. You do own Bitcoin. And the way you own that is that Bitcoin is a massive network. It has the largest amount of computing power securing the network out of anything in this world. And that's very important. And the thing is, it's a distributed ledger. So basically, there's all these what are called nodes that hold the whole transactional history of Bitcoin on them. And that transactional history is distributed amongst thousands of computers so that if any one computer is jeopardized or goes down or is hacked or the government shuts it down, we still have thousands of redundant copies of the entire ledger. So in order to take Bitcoin down, they would have to find every single computer there is in the world, scattered all over the globe in all kinds of different locations, and take them all out. That's the only way to get rid of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin does exist. It's a computer algorithm that exists on these computers, and there's no way for a government agency or anyone really to take Bitcoin down. It's just too distributed. So Bitcoin is going to exist no matter what. And if you buy Bitcoin and you store it properly on what's called cold storage, it's essentially a glorified USB drive. So once you buy your Bitcoin, you can put it onto this drive and unplug it from the internet. And that holds your keys to access your Bitcoin, which is stored on the network. So no one else can access your Bitcoin, which is tracked on the ledger, unless they have your private keys. So once you've secured your private keys, you own that Bitcoin, you have the keys to that Bitcoin, and no one else can do that. So essentially, you do own your Bitcoin, and you have in your physical possession the keys to your Bitcoin. So even though it's not a physical object, you're always going to have that. You're always going to own that because it's going to be impossible to take down Bitcoin. And the importance of Bitcoin right now is that the government currencies are being printed into oblivion. So they're just completely increasing the money supply. And every time they do that, it waters down the money supply and it decreases your purchasing power. So when we're in that kind of environment and we're all busy working for government fiat currencies to try and save and get ahead, however, the governments are printing it, watering down its purchasing power, we're losing value in our dollars. So that when you're in that kind of environment, it's really important to hold something that people cannot manipulate or counterfeit the currency you're holding. So if you're holding Canadian dollars and they double the money supply, essentially what happens is it cuts the purchasing power of that dollar in half. And so that's, you don't want to be if you're able to save and you're trying to get ahead, you don't want to have the bulk of your savings in something like that because you're losing purchasing power. And something like gold, they can't do that. They can't just come and double the money supply in a year. There's no physical way to do that. If they ramped up all of the mines in the world, they can only increase the money supply by 2.5%. The gold supply by 2.5%. So that's what's liked about gold by the masses, is that it's a guaranteed, we know the inflation rate of it. However, government currency, they could come in and they could double the money supply and you'd have a 50% inflation that year, essentially cutting down your purchasing power. Bitcoin gets around this by having mathematical algorithms. You don't have to understand it too much. Just put into simple terms here. The mathematical algorithms guarantee that there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin that are mined. For a Bitcoin to come into creation, they have supercomputers that are specially constructed computers that work on these long, complex mathematical equations. And once they solve that equation, that is how a Bitcoin comes into creation. And in order to try and counterfeit a Bitcoin, somebody would need to have as much computing power as all of the Bitcoin network combined, running for as long as the Bitcoin network has run, in order to just attempt to try and counterfeit a Bitcoin and put it onto the network. And all the existing nodes and computers right away would recognize that that Bitcoin wasn't legit and would kick it off. So Bitcoin offers a way to guarantee that there's no way to counterfeit Bitcoin. There's only 21 million. There only ever will be. And so while all these governments are printing their currencies into oblivion, Bitcoin offers tremendous value because it's guaranteed that no one is going to inflate the supply away. Bitcoin has what's called a set inflation schedule, and it's programmed into the mathematical algorithms of Bitcoin, ensuring that there's only so much Bitcoin that is going to be created every year. So over the past 4 years, Bitcoin has had roughly an inflation rate of 4%. And this year, actually next month, Bitcoin is set to cut that inflation in half. So every 4 years, it has an event that is called the halving. And what happens is it becomes exponentially harder to get new Bitcoin, and the inflation of Bitcoin gets cut in half. So we were at 4% inflation. So 4% of the total supply of Bitcoin comes on the market every year. 4 additional percent of what we had comes on the market every year. So that's a set inflation, which is good. If you're holding something long term, you want to know the inflation. You need to be able to factor that in. And with government currencies, you can't do that. There's no guarantee. We're seeing it now. They're coming in and they're just totally increasing the money supply, which is destroying your purchasing power. People think this is a good thing. All this, they're bailing everyone out and giving everyone free money. It's horrible. It's destroying our currency. They're giving you the currency, but they're destroying its purchasing power while they get rich because they're holding the real assets like gold and silver, and they're probably even buying Bitcoin, the smart ones. So this halving event that's taking place next month, basically what happens is the total new supply of Bitcoin coming on the market gets cut in half. So right at a time where we could have really high increased demand for Bitcoin, the total new supply gets cut in half. So now all the people looking to get into the market, newcomers, and people looking to increase their holdings, that puts an increased demand on Bitcoin, However, the total supply is getting cut in half. So there's less Bitcoin coming on and a whole bunch of increased demand. So what that does is basically anyone looking to get Bitcoin now has to buy from people that are already holding. And those people don't want to sell when price is moving up. So traditionally, what has happened during this event is sometime within the year of the halving, price skyrockets. So last time we were maybe, I'd have to look at the charts, but say we were around $1,500 and the price skyrocketed all the way up to 20,000 US or 25,000 Canadian. So this is what people are expecting in the crypto market coming into the halving event. It's not going to happen exactly on that day, but usually it happens within a year. So it's probably going to happen within this year where we see a whole bunch of increased demand and the supply gets cut in half next month. So that will put upward pressure on the price. And this year, it's a big deal because Bitcoin's inflation is getting cut down to 1.9%. So 1.9% of the total Bitcoin that we have in circulation is being created additionally and added to the market. And the reason this number is important to me and to others is because the inflation of Bitcoin is now dropping below that of gold. And so it essentially is becoming harder money than gold in a sense. And another thing that's going to drive up this demand is that gold and silver are a great thing to hold in these inflationary environments when the governments are creating all this currency. However, it's getting really hard to get physical gold and silver. The bullion dealers are sold out. The Canadian Mint is sold out. The US Mint is sold out. And there's huge shortages in bullion. And I went to order gold and silver the other day. They said, 2 to 4 weeks minimum wait. There's $12,000 minimum order for gold and $2,500 minimum order for silver. Most people don't have that kind of money. So now you can't even get gold and silver unless you have that kind of coin sitting around, which most don't. So what happens? You're now stuck in these government currencies as they inflate them away and devalue them. So there's nowhere left to go except Bitcoin. So I believe that that's going to put a huge, tremendous upside pressure on Bitcoin as people just have nowhere else to go to protect their wealth as these governments inflate the currencies away or try to stop deflation by printing money, and they try and prop up these markets by creating all this currency and putting it into circulation in the form of debt. So basically, that liquidity that they create and put into the markets eventually comes into play in the form of inflation and devaluation of the dollar. And when that happens, you don't want to be holding dollars. You don't want to have your savings in those dollars. I learned the hard way, trust me. I had some chunk of coin from selling my house, and let's just call it 100,000 for an easy round number. That purchasing power just in just over 10 years, 11 years, lost 66% of its purchasing power. And in true terms, it probably lost more like 75 or 80% of its buying power in just 11 years. Hard to believe, but look at the charts, start studying these things, and you will see for yourself. That is how quickly these currencies are devaluing. So you don't want to be holding your bulk of your wealth in these fiat currencies during these inflationary events. So that I've ranted long enough. I just wanted to give a quick overview of why I think Bitcoin has tremendous value moving forward, why everyone should own some Bitcoin. It really is the people's money. The elites and central banks actually control a large part of the gold and silver markets by they own a lot of it, and then they also have these derivative markets, these ETF funds, where they're able to manipulate the price of these assets. And a lot of people are even counterfeiting gold. They're gold plating it. So there's a lot of risk involved in and a lot of things that come into play with holding gold and silver as well. However, Bitcoin gets around a lot of that. And I think you all should start reading about it and learning about it, because number one, you can't counterfeit Bitcoin. Number two, it's accessible to anyone. Number three, by owning Bitcoin, you own a part of this network, and it's essentially an insurance. It's the only completely free market monetary system we have, and it's 100% separate from the traditional markets. So with all this Keynesian madness where they're printing all this currency, we've never seen anything like this. They're giving away the money for free. It's an insurance policy to own a part of a network that is completely held outside of traditional markets, and we can exchange freely amongst ourselves. It's a peer-to-peer network, essentially, that's decentralized, so there's no central point that can be attacked, and the governments can't take it down. It's their worst nightmare. So I think everyone should own Bitcoin, especially in this day and age. I just love Bitcoin. I think it's fantastic technology. I like Robert Kiyosaki. Kiyosaki's finally started talking about Bitcoin and calling it the people's money. I totally agree. It is truly the people's money. It's a path to liberation. It's up to us to all adopt it and start using it and holding it. That is what holds its value. That is what will increase its value. And I think moving forward, it's important for everyone to hold Bitcoin and learn how to use it and properly store it. With that being said, I'm going to cut it there. I've rambled long enough, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Again, please like, subscribe, share this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Feel free to ask questions. I love answering questions. It gives me something to speak on and create more content. And yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. I love you guys. Have a fantastic day. Stay healthy, stay safe, and prosper.